Tonight's video will be featuring 3 cryptid stories and a bonus story. Who knows what could be lingering in the woods, or even in your own home. A huge thank you to the writers. Remember, you can send in your own story to rylhstories@gmail.com. If you enjoy the video, likes and comments are always appreciated, as I read every single one. Subscribing if you're new is as well. Enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. I've been working second shift for a couple of years now, and I have to say it's come with some distinct advantages. The biggest one I can tell you is that by the time I get off work, most people are home and either asleep or ready to go to sleep. This means my drive home is peaceful, with few drivers to look out for, and almost no one to slow me down. But last night my drive home ended with something I cannot fully explain. I need to give you a little bit of information about my drive home. I live just on the outskirts of a mid-sized city. The drive itself is only about 25 minutes. Hell, I cut that down to 20 at nights when I get to speed home. The important thing to know is there are a lot of fields on both sides of the road for most of my drive. Roadkill is a common sight. Deer were unfortunately the most common. They'd sneak out of the fields trying to cross to the other side, only to be met with a car going a little too fast to stop in time. It's unfortunate, but they would be left on the side of the road with contorted limbs, a bent neck, or gore spilling from their body, sometimes all of the above. A pretty gruesome and violent death, but something most people are desensitized to, with how common it is. Day by day the corpse would slowly rot. Each day I could see the decay as I drove by, until that day where it was just gone. I still have no idea where those dead deer go. I just know they sit there for days rotting, and then suddenly they are gone, and the side of the road waits for its next piece of roadkill. Nearly every night as I drive home from work, I would see a doe that would linger on the edge of the field, like she was waiting for her chance to cross. I would usually slow down and make sure she didn't do anything stupid. There were a few times she stood in the center of the road, and I would have to lay on the horn to get her to move. I figured I'd see her on the side of the road after a while, hit by some speeding driver. Well, last night I was in a bit of a rush to get home. There was no particular reason for it. Maybe I was hungry and wanted to get some food in my belly, or maybe I just wanted to get home and relax. I'm not entirely sure myself, but I found my foot pushing a little too hard on the gas as I sped down the field-lined road, watching as my speedometer crept ever higher. I think by now you have a clear idea of what happened. I slammed into that deer at maximum speed. There was a loud thud and my car shook from the impact. She flipped clear over my car and landed behind me as I pushed my foot down on the brake pedal. I barely kept control of the car until it finally skidded to a stop. My immediate thought was to check to make sure I wasn't injured. I felt fine. Other than a jerk forward from braking so hard, there was no reason I would be injured. I looked myself over and everything was fine. I shamefully must admit that my next thought was not on the deer who lay in the road behind me, but instead it was my car. I took a deep breath and opened my door, stepping out into the dark of night. I moved to the front of my car to inspect the damage. In the dark it was difficult to see, but the front bumper and hood had received damage, though it was nothing catastrophic. I hoped that my insurance would cover it, as I cursed aloud at the situation. Lastly, I decided to check on the deer. It was immediately clear that she was dead. Her head was bent back so far it nearly touched her back. Blood escaped from her open mouth, and some of her limbs were going in directions that were just unnatural. It was a horrific death, and I silently cursed myself for not slowing down and paying more attention. This could have all been avoided. What follows could have been avoided. I returned to my car to fetch a pair of gloves from the glove department. I wasn't going to touch that thing without some gloves on, but I had to get that deer out of the road, so drivers don't continue to run her over. It was the least I could do. So I grabbed the legs and began to pull the deer off the side of the road. She was heavier than I imagined, but it wasn't far. As I got her to the side of the road, I let go of her legs and noticed something odd. On her side I could see a pulsating pattern, like the muscle underneath was moving. A death spasm perhaps, or maybe some sort of twitch. It was a violent death, so it didn't seem out of the realm of possibility. I watched as it continued, curiously placing my hand on the area and feeling the rumble underneath. But then something happened, and the pulsation grew more rapid, more violent. I removed my hand out of fear, as the area began to bulge like something underneath the skin was pressing to get out. I watched the skin bulge and then relax, bulge and relax. Each time the bulge grew bigger, stretching the limits of the deer's skin. My heart rate was skyrocketing, but things would only get worse. I was backing up now, but I could still see clearly that the skin ripped, and out came a blood-covered hand. A human hand. I had seen enough. I ran to my car and tried to start it, but I was fumbling with the keys out of nervousness. I started to panic as I got the keys in place and started the car. Looking in the rearview mirror, I could see an entire body emerging from that dead deer. It had the head of a buck, complete with a set of gigantic antlers. But its body was human, and covered in the entrails and blood of the dead deer. It stood on 2 legs, being nearly 8 feet tall, by my quick estimation. My God, it wasn't even possible for something like that to fit inside of a deer that size. I didn't have time to speculate on what it was, or how it came to be. I put my car into drive and sped off as it turned around. I kept watch on it through the rearview mirror, and saw it get down onto all 4s, and to my horror, it started to run after me. The way it ran on all 4s with a human body was startling. The unnatural gait somehow lended itself to a furious speed. Its eyes were filled with malice, and copious amounts of drool dripped from its mouth. I floored it as it gained on me. There was no way it could outrun my car. But my car struggled to accelerate, and I could hear a low grunting noise coming from the deer creature. He was so close now, my nerves were shattering. I had a death grip on my steering wheel, as I prayed for my car to move faster. Its antlers scraped the back of my car, and it disappeared from my rearview mirror, and came into my side view mirror, as it made its way up alongside my car. With quick thinking, I turned the wheel ever so slightly to the left in an effort to push him away. To my fortune, he stumbled and fell, losing all momentum. My car, having finally gained enough speed, roared down the rest of the road without issue. I made a few last checks in my rearview mirror, but the deer creature was gone from sight. I got home safely, but there was no way I could sleep after an event like that. I alternated between anxious pacing and sitting at my computer to search the internet. I searched everywhere for some sort of explanation. I read about skinwalkers, wendigos, ghosts, demons, but none of it really matched or explained what this thing was. Half of it was fictional stories that people cooked up, and the other half were likely all made up too. As I paced past my window for probably the 1000th time that night, my motion sensor light on my front yard lit up. To my horror, it stood there on 2 legs in my front yard. The deer creature arched its head back and forth, almost like it was sniffing the air. I crouched down below the window, and before I knew it, I had found myself laying down on the floor, in the fetal position, trying my best to not make any noise. Terrifying thoughts of him catching me and goring me with his antlers ran through my head. I don't know how long I laid there, but I only moved once the sun started to come up. I cautiously checked the front yard and it was clear. I looked out every window in my house to make sure it wasn't just waiting outside, but I didn't see any sign of it. I tried to convince myself I was delusional. It was all just my imagination or I was sick. But my car still has the damage from hitting that deer and scratches all over the back from that thing's antlers. There was no denying that. A quick shower and change of clothes had me feeling a little more at ease, but my lack of sleep was starting to catch up with me. I had to go to work though, and that meant going back down that road. I could detour around it, but I wanted to see if that dead deer was still laying on the side of the road. The car started as usual, and I found myself driving to work on autopilot. My thoughts went back to last night's events, and I nearly lost my nerve to keep going. But I reasoned that in the day, it would be safe to go down that road. Traffic was heavier during the day, and for once, I was thankful that there would be more people than just me on the road. But when I was approaching that road, I saw a multitude of police cars with their sirens on. They were blocking it off. Testing my luck, I rolled down my window as I approached the turn, and decided to ask the officer what was going on. "This road closed? Something happened down here?" I asked the officer. "Yeah, road's closed for now. You can go up to the next road and cut through there if you need a detour." He was not forthcoming on the reason, so I tried a second time. "Can I ask why you're closing it? Was there an accident? Right now I can't say anything for certain. The policeman looked around before leaning in and speaking softly. This was no car accident, all I can say. I gave him a quick thanks and began to slowly drive off. Peering down the road as best I could, I noticed an ambulance there. An ominous feeling came over me as I started to think about that deer creature. I saw a group of men who appeared to be field workers, judging by their slightly dirty clothes and gloves. They all frowned as they sat silently outside the barricade of police cars, and one of them appeared to be crying. I pulled my car over and decided to ask if they knew anything. "You guys know anything about why this road is closed?" I asked. The group of guys just looked at me, and then at each other. But one of them stepped forward and spoke to me reluctantly. Ain't no easy way to say it, but there's been a murder down that road. One of my workers. There was a long pause and I thought he might stop there, but he offered up more details. Well, he usually is the first one here every morning, but this morning we came in and found him on the side of the road, dead as could be. Looked like an animal got him. He was ripped to shreds. Had holes in him that looked like a frickin' buck that charged into him several times. But I never heard of a buck killing someone. They ain't aggressive animals. My blood ran cold as he told me this. I stuttered out something about being sorry for their loss, and turned around to head home. Whatever that thing is, I can only hope it never finds me again. I live in a big house by a country road in Pennsylvania. I love the outdoors. Often I go hiking, fishing, hunting, or ride on my ATV whenever I have a day off from work. There's a massive forest behind my house, and I have had countless adventures in those woods. Sometimes during the night, animals visit my backyard. I don't mind, they never cause any trouble. But I have a security camera that monitors that backyard just in case. Most of the time it's just deer, foxes, and one time even a black bear. There are not a lot of houses in my area, so the animals are essentially my neighbors. Last year I invited my friends and family to my place for a barbecue cookout during the 4th of July. The adults and I were on the deck telling silly stories of things that happened at work. Their children were either playing in the backyard shooting Nerf guns at each other, or inside playing video games. After the party ended, I cleaned up around the house. Around 10 p.m. I was in the living room watching the news. I started to hear loud shrieks coming from the woods. I turned on the lights in the backyard and looked through the kitchen window, but saw nothing. I didn't think much of it, and assumed that it was just a cougar. I've seen them a few times throughout the summer while hiking in the forest late at nights. I turned the lights off and I went to bed. The next morning I decided to check the security camera to see if any animals came to my backyard, but nothing happened that night. I was off from work that day, so I took my ATV and ventured into the woods. About 10 minutes of driving through the forest, I came across the remains of a buck deer covered in claw marks laying in the dirt. His eyes and tongue were ripped out. Upon farther examination, there was a massive slit under the belly, and all of its organs were removed. This was rather unusual, and I assumed that the deer was attacked by a bear. I brushed it off and continued to ride my ATV through the forest. After 20 minutes gone by, I got thirsty and stopped by a small rocky cliff near a creek. I drank my water while sitting on that cliff. It was very relaxing hearing the calm stream of water and the birds chirping in the trees. I saw a red-tailed hawk swoop down into the water and grab a large fish. It was an incredible sight, and things like that is why I love going into the woods. Just when I was about to go back to my ATV and drive home, I noticed there was a corpse of a young man laying in the bottom of the cliff, and blood was smeared all over the rocks around the body. I walked down a nearby hill to get a closer look, and much the buck I saw earlier, the corpse was covered in claw marks, and the tongue, eyes, and organs were ripped out. This unsettled me, so I took pictures of the corpse and showed them to the police when I got home. The police recovered the human corpse for further investigation, and told me to contact them if I find anything else suspicious in the forest. After they left, I went to a diner for lunch with my best friend, George. "Something strange has been going on in the woods," I said. "I came across a husk of a deer, and later a young man. Both of them had all their organs, eyes, and tongue extracted by something." George had a curious look on his face. I recently got a job with the local police, and there have been numerous reports of cattle and even human corpses with the same condition for the past week. He said. What he told me gave me an uneasy feeling. Some farmers think that it might be aliens abducting people and animals, but that's just ridiculous. He drank his coffee and asked the waitress for a refill. He noticed a nervous look on my face. What's wrong? You think aliens are doing this? George laughed. No, not at all. I'm probably still in shock from what I saw in the woods earlier, I said. George nodded his head. I would be spooked too if I was in your shoes. Well, at least you didn't go Logan Paul, recording the dead body and making a joke out of it, said George. I chuckled from his comment, and after lunch I headed home. As much as I love the outdoors, I didn't feel safe going into the woods anymore. So I locked all my doors and windows, and played on my PS4 for the rest of the afternoon. When it got dark outside, I started hearing the same screaming that I heard last night. I turned on the lights in the backyard, and for a split second I saw a pair of big eyes in the woods, reflecting the lights before rushing deep into the woods. I kept hearing the screaming throughout the night, so I went to bed with headphones on listening to relaxing music, and I had a pocket pistol under the pillow, just in case something enters my room. Luckily I was able to sleep well for the night. When I had breakfast the next morning, I checked the security camera. Nothing came to my backyard until 3:17 a.m. I was shocked at what I saw. A hairy humanoid with 6 long limbs crawled into my backyard. It had dark shaggy hair hanging from it like an orangutan. There was an arm directly on top of each shoulder. It had big glowing eyes with no pupil, massive claws on each hand, and had its mouth gaping open with long sharp teeth. It was dragging a massive bear covered in claw marks. The creature then began to eat the bear, but rather than just devouring it, the beast cut open the belly and ate the organs inside. It also ate the eyes and tongue. When the creature finished eating, it came to the back door and scratched it like a dog trying to get inside. It snarled and slowly crawled its way back to the woods, leaving behind the bear skin and bones. Of all the years I spent in those woods, I have never seen anything like this. I went to my backyard and sure enough the empty husk of the bear was lying in the grass. I checked my door and there was no damage. I called the police immediately, and George came with them. I showed them the bear husk and the security footage. This is horrifying, cried George. Whatever that thing is probably the one who killed all those people and animals. George and the other officer decided to contact the state police. Shortly after, a squadron came and searched the forest. After several hours, they didn't find anything, so they left the area. When I came home from work that night, I began to hear the same screaming sounds coming from the woods. I was outside and I heard the sound much clearer. It sounded like a dog or hyena, but much deeper. I could not let this creature harm people and their livestock. I wanted to end this once and for all. I grabbed my hunting shotgun, pocket pistol, cell phone, and flashlights. I then started to walk into the woods. As I journeyed into the forest, the screams echoed all over the place. The creature could be anywhere. Suddenly I saw it several yards away from me, eating the insides of an elk. I carefully aimed my gun at the monster, and then it noticed me. I pulled the trigger and shot it. The beast fell over but quickly got up, brushing off the bullets on its chest. The bullet didn't even penetrate the skin. The ape creature gave out an enraged roar, and it charged at me on all 6 limbs. I shot it 4 more times, but they only slightly knocked the creature back. My gun suddenly jammed, and the creature jumped towards me. I swung my shotgun at its head like a baseball bat. I heard its neck snap and the creature cried in pain. It fell to the ground, and its top pair of arms snapped its head back in place. The creature snarled at me, and ran deeper into the woods. I tried shooting it with my pocket pistol, but the creature got away. Exhausted, I walked back to my house. I checked my phone and it was 11 p.m. I locked everything and went to bed. I woke up at 4 in the morning and started hearing loud banging coming from the back door. I put on my pair of night vision goggles and looked through my window. I was startled when I saw not 1, but 3 ape creatures standing on my deck. One of them was able to smash the door open, and they crawled into my house one by one. Terrified, I tried calling 911, but my phone was dead. I could hear the beasts walking through the house. They curiously looked around the house, interacting with objects around them. I then noticed that one of them was right underneath my chandelier by the front door. I shot the chain holding the chandelier, and it fell on top of the beast. I then ran down the stairs to the front door. The other two creatures began to chase me. One of them walked on the broken glass and cried in pain. The other one observed the two injured creatures and then climbed on the wall, avoiding the glass as if it were an insect. I put my shoes on and ran for the car. Just when I was about to start the engine, the ape creature slammed into my car, nearly pushing it over. I started the engine and drove away from my house. I headed to a hotel near a highway and asked for a room on the top floor. I spent the rest of the night there sleeping. I called off work the next morning, telling them I was sick. I was able to charge up my phone in the hotel room and called the police. Besides the chandelier and back door, not much was damaged in my house. When the police investigated my house, all the creatures were gone. However, the police were able to find clumps of black hair around the house, as well as some blood around the broken glass, and samples of hair and blood they collected has only added more mystery to what happened. At first it didn't seem like anything unusual, but one of the scientists in the crime lab discovered that their chemical makeup wasn't only organic, that it seemed unexpectedly mechanical, an organic machine. The samples were then sent to a hospital lab for farther research. After I got the damage in my house repaired, I adopted a young German Shepherd from an animal shelter. I took her with me whenever I went into the woods, and stayed out of there whenever it was dark outside. I haven't seen the creatures since then, but every once in a while I hear them screaming in the woods. Occasionally there are still reports in the local newspaper of animal and human husks being found in my area. Every time, I'm reminded of those things. I keep asking to myself, what are they? But more importantly, how many more are out there? So I am a camp counselor at a summer camp, and this is my 6th year in a row coming down to staff at this summer camp. And all the stories, legends, and history of where I staff, I shall keep the location anonymous. But for location reference, this is in the forests of South Midwestern United States, and I thought could be some good stories for here. My first story is the legend of the Watchers. The Watchers have been talked about for generations at this summer camp, and many have claimed to see them mostly at night, and very rarely during the daytime. It is believed that they are human-like creatures, with large hunchbacks, long claw-like fingernails, and have hair all over their body. Other facts about these creatures are they slouch, on occasion make grunting noises, and can either walk on their hind legs or run on all fours for quicker movement. The only action they have ever done is watch the staff and campers from a distance, and on rare occasions, chase after people because of unknown reasons. One example was a story from a former staffer, who I knew, and to keep her anonymous, we will call her Kate. Kate was hiking around the backcountry of the reservation, and the sun was setting much faster than what she anticipated on the warm July evening. As she was picking up the pace to get back to the staff village, she had the strange feeling she was being watched. This only caused her to panic and move quicker down the trail, and soon after she tripped and fell, cutting open a wound on her arm. Now panicked from the sight of the gash, she had no choice but to stay there and bandage herself up. As she is fixing herself up and calming down, she notices a strange figure off in the distance. It was only when she stood up when she realized it was a watcher. How she described it was it felt like she was staring at it forever, waiting to see if it would move while slowly backing away from it. When Kate felt she was a good distance away from the watcher, she turned her back to it, and then saw yet another watcher off in the distance, but in the other direction. It wasn't until she saw the second watcher that she realized that she was surrounded by them. Seemingly they were in every direction. That was when she ran down the trail in a complete panic back to Staff Village. She continued the rest of that summer, but she was never the same after that day. She has never stepped foot back on this reservation after that year though. Another example of the Watchers was from a staffer that served before I even came onto the staff. Same as before, we will call him John, to keep his name anonymous. This story starts with John just sitting in his cabin while passing time away, and after 30 minutes or so of reading his book, he heard a lot of rustling outside his cabin, on the back side of it. Curious, he went to investigate, and after going 50 meters off the beaten path, there it was, a watcher just looking at him. John decided to move closer to the watcher, and this is when it came charging at him on all fours. John panicked, ran as fast as he could back to his cabin, and stayed there until one of his cabin mates came by. He returned to the staff for 2 more years, before he decided to not come back. One last story about the watchers before I let you go till next time. This story involves my current boss, and his experience with a watcher. Again, to keep his name anonymous, we will call him Phil for his story. In the dead of night on Phil's first day of his first year, as a staffer at this camp, he and his new buddies have been hearing all the stories of the watcher, and wanted to know if the legends were true. So they went out that night and were on the hunt for a watcher. But little did they know, you don't find a watcher finds you. After a few hours of looking, it was nearly 3 a.m., and they were all begging to believe the watcher legend was just that, a legend. That wasn't until they turned around to head back to Staff Village, and there it was. The watcher not even 50 meters away from them. Phil and his friends were frozen right in place. It was only when the watcher let out a horrifying, blood-curdling growl that they all ran off in all different directions. They all managed to get back to Staff Village, and the next day they all made a pact that they would learn more about the watchers, and what their purpose was. But now Phil is the only one from that group still on the summer camp staff. The others have moved on. That's all I have for now. So until next time, thanks for reading, and just remember, you are always being watched. My life wasn't always the best. My parents were druggies and they got off on hitting me whenever they felt like they had an excuse to. My dad and mother wouldn't just hit me, they would burn me with cigarettes, hit me with metal poles, put me in the woods alone, and make me drink my own piss, and would always make me find food because they wouldn't provide it for me, even though we had enough. It wasn't always like this, you know. There was a short period of time where it was happy for a while. My dad, before he became an addict, was a respectable lieutenant in the Marines. He would be away fighting a war I barely understood because I was so young and innocent. My mother would hold me in her arms and read me bedtime stories before I went to sleep. Those were the only days I really felt love. Things went bad when my father came home from war. He drank a lot, smoked a lot, and yelled a lot. I can only imagine it was from the things he saw while away. One night my father came into my bedroom and started throwing things around and screaming at me. My mother, being the caring person she used to be, stood up to my father, but that only got her hit in the face with a bunch of wooden stairs before hitting her body as she fell down them. That was the first time I'd ever seen my father hit my mother. There were many, and when I say many, there was plenty of times where he hit her non-stop some nights. Soon my mother stopped loving me, holding me, reading me stories, and she even stopped talking to me. Instead of all those things she should have been doing, she joined my father in hitting me and torturing me. I felt betrayed, and of course in doing this she stopped getting hit herself. Eventually I turned 15 years of age, and that day I will remember forever. My father came into my room drunk and gave me 15 burns and wished me a happy birthday. My mother just watched. That night I packed up my things and left, and went to my friend Tommy's house. His parents were always more of a family to me than my actual one, if I could even call it that. I explained to Tommy and his parents I could no longer stay at my, well, hellhole. They said I could stay as long as I needed. They showed me care and kindness when nobody did, and life got easier as it rolled along. One day Tommy's parents adopted me, and I was so exhilarated to become a part of something I never had. A family. A month later after the adoption, we turned on the television to see what was on. We were just flipping through channels one at a time, and then we flipped past a news story I didn't think much of. But when I saw my mother and father's names with the caption saying, "2 shot dead in drug deal gone wrong," and then both my parents' names were both shown with pictures of them. The lady that was doing the reports, her words never went through my ears as I sat there shocked. "Hey son, it's okay. We are here for you." My new father said, "Yeah man, if you ever need to talk, just let us know." Tommy said, looking at me with concern, "It's fine you guys. They were terrible people anyway. I think I'm just going to bed. Good night guys." I went up to my room and sat down. Those people were horrible to me, and yet I still felt sad. Eventually, sometime after crying, I fell asleep. Fast forward a few years later, and I was sitting at a bar in the middle of town with my brother Tommy. We were having a conversation about if we should join the Special Forces. At the time, we were both 21. The conversation went a little something like this. "Tommy, I have a brilliant idea. What if we join the Special Forces?" "You're crazy, man. You know how much they go through just for training? You would never survive." "But what if we did? Think about it. Secret missions, advanced training, getting stronger, dealing with weapons, etc. You know what? I agree. Let's do it." And with that, we tried Special Forces training a year later. The training was hard. We ran up to 20 to 35 miles a week. We had to run 4 miles in under 35 minutes, swim in frigid waters, and much more intense training. As soon as all our training was complete, we had a week to see if we made it on the Special Forces. Tommy and I were sitting in our tent on the base. "You think we'll make it?" he asked excitedly. "I hope so, or all those long days of training were for nothing," I said. "We should get some rest," he suggested, and I agreed. The next day, a handful of people were brought to a room in the base. The general was there, and along with other military officials as well. "You," the general pointed to me. "You've been selected to lead these fine young men to recover data from an outpost in Russia. Do you accept?" I was confused and it came out of nowhere. And I didn't know if I made it into the Special Forces yet. Tommy looked just as confused as I was. "Well?" He pressed me more. "I will take the mission, sir. Does this mean we made it into the Special Forces?" I asked. "What do you think it means? Everyone go get ready for the trip. We leave tomorrow. Be up at 3 a.m. sharp. Dismissed." The general sent us back to our tents to get ready. The flight was long, but me and Tommy slept most of the way. It was about 15 minutes before we were supposed to deploy, when the general came in to explain the mission. "Alright everyone, this is your squad leader." He gestured towards me. "You will listen to him. We are dropping you off 2.5 days away from your target, because we don't want the Russians to expect a thing." I was nervous at hearing this. Almost 3 days away from our target. And we have to travel through snowy mountains. Just great. After he was done explaining everything, we grabbed out parachutes, and one by one, everyone deployed. I was the last and Tommy was the first. We had 15 people in our squad, and each with the bravest and fearsome personality I'd ever seen. It was fine the first day, and half the second day. Sure, there were a few things off and we didn't take much to notice them. For example, animals didn't run from us, even as we got close to them. Temperatures would range from -30 to all of a sudden being 40 degrees. It was odd, but it didn't matter. It wasn't until the second half of the second day when things got weird. The men started getting restless, and one of them even tried to bite another man. One tried to hop off a cliff on the snowy mountainside. A few started mumbling to themselves, as if they had gone completely mad. Tommy took as much notice as I did, and he stuck close to me as we carried on. When night came around, we set up camp and Tommy and I shared a tent. As normal, we had dinner, started a fire, and when we were done, put it out. It was around 4 in the morning when I randomly woke up, and I immediately took notice that Tommy and I weren't the only ones in the room. I quickly turned around and saw one of the 13 other men standing there. I will never forget this moment. He stared at me with eyes open wider than a human could possibly open them. His pupils were black, and his smile went all the way up to his face. He had a knife in his hand. I thought this was it. Then I heard him talk, only his voice was a deep, dark tone. "Leave us, or you will join us in the snow." And with that, the man stabbed himself repeatedly till he bled out. But he still had the same expression on his face. Even when he died, that is what haunted me the most. The next day we awoke early after burying the man who died. It was a long hike, and it started to get very stormy. We saw our target on a mountain, and we rejoiced at seeing it. We continued. I heard Tommy's voice from behind me. "Hey, 2 of the men disappeared. We think they fell behind." He yelled because the snowstorm started to get worse and worse by the minute. "Let's go check it out," I yelled. "I'm sure we'll find them." We walked about a mile before we discovered that there was blood on the snow. "What the hell happened to them?" one man said. "What is this?" A man screamed, and I rushed over to the man, and by his feet there were words saying, "Leave, or join us in the snow." but that isn't what he screamed at. There was a snow hill, and in front of it were the two men with blood in their dark pupiled eyes, and inhuman smiles, just like the last men. It has been a few hours, as Tommy and I are the only ones left. Each hour we find one more man dead, and ended up like the others. The storm only got worse. A few hours ago, Tommy's eyes started to become all black, and he started getting an unfadable smile. I couldn't bear it, so I shot him in the head where he stood. It's just me now. The storm is worse, and I am now starting to notice that I am too. Starting to get a long smile, and black eyes. I am sending this transmission out to anyone that can find it and hear me. Do not go up into Russia's mountains, or you will end up like me, in the snow, with them.